Next up in the card releases for Zenonzard is Beyond. This is a small 70 card set intended to supplement the original Awaken metagame. It's listed as Packcode 01 Re, as in regards to the first set. This pack shook up the game by correcting some design issues of the first set and added some new keywords to supplement the game's defining mechanics, movement, similar to how the 9 Knight set supplemented the force mechanic. Now let's get into what changes the Beyond pack brought into the game, and then we'll get into how the meta shifted. Beyond, the Children of Calamity.
さあ、私たちのバトルを始めましょう。
Out with Chimera, and with good base minions. In Awaken, base minions were very weak and it was pretty much necessary to use Chimera for mana fixing. With the release of Beyond came base minions with very powerful effects that were activated simply by placing them from your hand into your mana area. Dwarven Champion granted a red minion charge. Mer Soldier granted you an extra movement. And Android Commando is a force block that dodged the Sphinx force. All of these abilities had no cost and were super powerful. These cards all had a great impact on the meta moving forward. New keyword and activation timing when retreating. Effects can now activate when moving certain minions from the field to the base. This can turn your movement for the turn into an actual advantage, making movement even more important than before. By consistently moving from base to field and field to base, you can influence the game even with no cards in hand, increasing your options in the late game. Lightning Fall Dragon. Lightning Fall Dragon became a necessity in many decks, a change represented in the Beyond environment since this card was originally from Awaken. Duskcurse was used in many decks, including his colorless aggro deck, which became part of the meta towards the end of Awaken. His ability to pop any neutral minion was an easy check to Duskcurse and other colorless threats. Not only was his ability strong at the time, he had 600 power for 4 mana, which was above the curve at the time, making him a strong wall and attacker. At one point, it was necessary to include Lightning Fall in your deck to pop your opponent's Lightning Fall. One of the most important things to note was how well you could use your Lightning Fall Dragon during the mid game. Now that we've gone over the meta changes that Beyond brought, let's get into the new decks that showed up. Looking back at the Beyond meta, most players probably think of the guy sitting in the center of the banner image. But the first deck that appeared didn't actually utilize him. Due to its RNG nature, the deck started showing up after those who were already hyped up and built before the set even dropped. There was one card that was hyped up by tryhards who have it etched into their brains that playing cards for free is powerful. Arcus, the opener of doors, was a demigod that allowed you to play a minion with an original cost of 6 or less from your hand onto the field by retreating him to the base. Arcus and Mer Soldier alongside the Pegasus Force created the mono blue mid-range deck, utilizing the new when retreating gimmick. This deck was difficult to play but really rewarding when you used your movement properly to cheese out a win. Destined to get nerfed. It wasn't long before the guy on the banner appeared and reared his ugly head in the meta. His name is Kiska, the Crusher of Hope. This is an infamous minion that players who played in this environment would never forget. Kiska had a crazy passive. When a purple minion is milled from your deck, you can activate its When Destroyed ability. Now this is pretty strong, but it doesn't seem too crazy, right? Well, Kiska also had a When Summoned ability to mill 5 cards. This has the potential to really break the game open. Let's take a look at some of the best When Destroyed purple minions at the time. Revenant was added in Beyond and spawns 3 tokens with Revenge when destroyed. Odd Eye was from Awaken and can pop a force and minion when destroyed. When summoning Kiska with a high roll, it can create some crazy esports-like moments that can instantly present 5 or 6 damage on the board while clearing your opponent's board, making it a rampage in the environment. Now even though Kiska has this kind of potential, don't let it crush your hopes. Kiska was explosive, but he was never strong. This deck relied on drawing Kiska in the first place, and then hitting 5 when destroyed effects off of your mill. The probability of these things happening is not even 40% in the Beyond environment. Some players may think that if the card is supposed to be a casual and fun card, but its expected value is around that level, then it's actually a strong meta card. But that's not the case. Unfortunately, despite the low chance of hitting 5 in a row from the Kiska Gacha, his existence would greatly restrict the design space of purple when destroyed cards. In card games, when destroyed effects are designed to be strong since it takes time to put them into play, and then they must be destroyed. And since one of purple's themes is use of the graveyard, purple is designed to have many when destroyed abilities. Kiska, who can activate multiple power effects per turn when summoned, literally breaks purple. Kiska was truly an existence that should never have been born, a card worthy of being called an aborted child. Here's a sample deck list for Kiska. Some builds use Ouroboros and Pegasus to ramp, but since it's an RNG deck, it's better to just use the Chimera Force and focus all your efforts into mulligans. You want to pull the gacha during the festival to increase your odds of hitting good targets. Because of this explosive and unmanageable RNG caused by Kiska, the control decks in the first half of the Beyond meta died out. Old decks with new tricks. In addition to the new decks that utilize new gimmicks, there are also decks from Awaken that got better with the new Beyond cards. One of the drawbacks of colorless aggro was that there wasn't much for the deck to do outside of the Twin Fleet combo. But by adding colorless minions with the excellent removal effects and the new Android Commando from Beyond, it developed into a stronger deck with plenty of removal and control. Baldrod at the time was able to destroy any minion in the game at the cost of picking your forces for 1. A Deck Goblin was also a strong addition, since it was able to pop 200 BP minions in other popular decks. Invention of the wheel. There are many innovative decks in card games that will make you say, how did you even come up with that idea? If you're wondering if that happened in Zenonzard, it certainly did. Enter Red White Aggro. Now this deck didn't suddenly appear from out of nowhere. In the Awaken meta, there was a red purple aggro that used Crimson Mail and Shadowhand to attack the enemy force. However, even though the deck was great at attacking, the targets it wanted to attack were divided. Red wants to hit the life with charge, and purple wants to destroy the forces, so there was some inconsistency with how the deck attacked. Then, with the release of Beyond, things changed. Let's take a look at Greg Smasher. This minion was from Awaken. It has 2 DP for just 3 mana, and it can amass huge power instantly. Now you could grant this minion charge with the newly released Dwarven Champion, making for a super threatening minion in the early game. This combo ensured that your opponents either taking 2 to the face or losing a minion, as nothing could stand up to Greg's power early game. The most notable thing about this deck, however, is the adoption of the Cyclops Force, which is arguably the worst force in the game. At the time, this increases your minion's power by 100 during your turn. Thanks to the power boost, this force turns your Doberman Tracer into an unstoppable killing machine. This deck specializes in using white minions to force blocks to clear your opponent's board, and right after you do that, drop red minions with charge to hit the life. Due to the popularity of red white aggro and colorless aggro, mono blue mid-range decks that focused on 200 BP minions in the early game became less popular. Not aggro, not mid-range, not control. In a meta where aggro and mid-range thrived and control has become extinct, there was an interesting deck that didn't fit into any of these categories but can still compete in the meta. That deck was Mono Yellow Leap and could be categorized as a tempo deck. The deck's key card is Time Leap, which returns all minions on the field to their owner's hands. This card was a board wipe that costed 1 less than purple's board wipe Pandemic, but bounces minions instead of destroying them. This card on its own is a -1, which is never good. However, in Zenonzard, you can send minions to the field at no cost by using movement, so you can turn your -1 into a tempo advantage. In fact, since purple was popular in this meta, this card can get those minions off the field without activating their when destroyed ability, making your tempo even stronger. Time Leap paired well with Arcus and the Pegasus Force. These cards don't grant any actual advantage, but can make very strong plays. This deck was extremely hard to play, however. I even tried it myself during the global beta, and I didn't know how to use it, so I don't have a video for this one. Several top 10 players on the Japanese server can cite that this deck was a part of the meta, but none of them actually used it themselves. Chapter 2. Beginning of Ranking Season 0. The abomination that should have never been born. Kiska was nerfed right before the ranking season. Dancing Cutlass also received a buff. The extra 100 BP seemed negligible, but it gave him a splashable answer to Doberman Tracer. The Chiliad was also buffed, gaining an additional 300 power to take him out of Baldrod's killing range. These changes allowed for a more balanced environment. And with that balanced environment comes a ranking season. Zenonzard's ranking period has players compete for the highest winning percentage in the first 10 ranked matches of the day. This is the first time in Zenonzard's competitive environment where you can't win based off of how often you play or luck. Let's go over the decks that emerged from Kiska's nerf to be used in the ranking season. It's hard to see what's right under your nose. With Kiska's nerf, control decks could finally return to the format, and what appeared was a more appropriate purple control deck that rejected the nerf Kiska. This deck takes advantage of the Pegasus force to turn their movement into advantage. The extra movement from Pegasus was particularly compatible with purple, which can use the graveyard and is good in the late game. The extra movement also lets you dodge your own pandemic. A more casual approach. Kiska's nerf allowed players to use decks that were more casual in the format and still see success. Here's a deck that was more fun to use than competitive but still showed up in ranked play. Turbo Chiliad. Chiliad's buff was very significant, making him harder to remove since he couldn't be popped by Baldrod anymore. Red-white aggro and colorless aggro couldn't remove the Chiliad, and his damage reduction prevented them from trampling you. Against purple, the deck would load up big minions in the base and go for an OTK with Alazan. Even though this deck used Chimera, it was hard to use Alazan since he took 3 blue mana and was hard to bring out if your force was destroyed. And conclusion. Season 0 has finally begun. Kieran combo popped up, Latches' combos popped up, and so did a mono-red Janus deck used by Xenocron in the 5 Walls event. These decks didn't have what it takes to stand up to the other aggro decks in the meta, since their strategies resolved in the late and mid game. The final deck we'll go over for this season is Purple Minotaur. Minotaur is an extremely strong force against the aggro depths that kept swinging face. This deck also adopted a 300 BP vanilla minion to bully the popular 200 BP minion. This prevented them from chipping away at your Minotaur force early game. The deck also adapted to the meta by countering the Phoenix force. This deck adopted Zentine, Seeker of the False God, so you could get off multiple attacks per turn. And thus, Season 0, the first ranking season, has come to an end. After this, do you know what the most popular card in the meta is? Well, if you think it's something super powerful, nope, it's just Pollen. This card was in every deck list shown in the video. This card came out in Beyond, but it won't be the last time you see it, so try and remember that.